They say war brings out the worst in humanity, but it also reveals the hidden hands that shape history. Not always generals or dictators, but corporations. This is the untold story of how one of America's most iconic brands, Coca-Cola, found a way to flourish under the Nazi regime, making profits while millions perished. To understand this, we have to go back to the 1920s. Coca-Cola had already established itself as a global beverage brand, and Germany was a prime market. After World War I, Coca-Cola began expanding rapidly throughout Europe, setting up bottling plants and supply chains. By 1929, Coca-Cola's German subsidiary, Coca-Cola GmbH, had been established in Essen. Business was booming. Then came Hitler. When the Nazis rose to power in 1933, most foreign companies hesitated. Germany was increasingly authoritarian, anti-Semitic, and heading toward totalitarian control. But Coca-Cola didn't pull out. Instead, it leaned in. Max Keith, the German head of Coca-Cola GmbH, quickly adapted the company's image to match the new regime. Marketing campaigns in Germany featured patriotic slogans. Coca-Cola sponsored major Nazi events, including rallies and festivals organized by the Hitler Youth. Even as Hitler's power tightened, Coca-Cola remained. In fact, it thrived. While many American companies lost ground, Coca-Cola became one of the most recognized brands in the Third Reich, all with the approval of the Nazi government. But things weren't just about brand survival. There were choices. Coca-Cola's German branch was not nationalized. It remained under American ownership, but the German operation was given full freedom to operate as it saw fit, including cooperating with Nazi institutions. Coca-Cola's bottling plants expanded, profits surged, and despite the ideological war between fascism and democracy, business continued. The Coca-Cola brand in Germany was considered pure, Aryan, and uncontroversial, and that was no accident. Max Keith worked closely with Nazi officials to ensure the company stayed in good standing. Coca-Cola even participated in the 1936 Berlin Olympics, a major propaganda victory for Hitler. The event was meant to showcase Aryan supremacy and Nazi organizational strength. Coca-Cola didn't just sponsor the games, it produced special edition bottles featuring the Olympic logo, distributed across the Reich. Meanwhile, in America, the public was unaware. The Coca-Cola brand image remained squeaky clean, associated with baseball, summer picnics, and small-town life. But in Germany, the same product had become a symbol of national pride under Hitler's rule. Things changed when war broke out in 1939. After Germany invaded Poland, alliances shifted. By 1941, the US and Germany were at war, and yet, somehow, Coca-Cola GmbH in Germany continued to operate. Coca-Cola shipments from the US had stopped. Raw materials like syrup became unavailable. That's when Max Keith invented something new, a drink that would keep the brand alive in Nazi Germany without American supplies. That drink was Fanta. Yes, Fanta was born in Nazi Germany, and it wasn't created for fun. It was a survival strategy. Keith developed Fanta from whatever ingredients he could find: whey, leftover fruit jute, and beet sugar. It was meant to keep bottling plants operational and preserve the Coca-Cola workforce, all under Hitler's regime. In 1943 alone, Germans drank over 3 million cases of Fanta. Coca-Cola had successfully rebranded itself during wartime, sidestepping trade bans while maintaining profits and Nazi approval. all this happened without any direct oversight from the American parent company, or so the story goes. But here's the truth. Coca-Cola, in the US, never formally denounced the German branch. They never sanctioned it, never dismantled it. In fact, after the war, the parent company welcomed the German operation back into the fold, rewarding Max Keith for keeping the brand alive. Fanta wasn't just a drink, it was a lifeline, a way for Coca-Cola to keep its foothold in Germany without appearing to support the Nazi war machine. But make no mistake, the factories that produced Fanta were operating inside a fascist state. Their supply chains, labor force, and distribution were all aligned with the wartime needs of Nazi Germany. As Allied forces bombed, cities and blockades tightened, Fanta production scaled to meet domestic demand. And the product wasn't just consumed by civilians, it was also supplied to Nazi soldiers and used at military banquets. In other words, Fanta wasn't just keeping Coca-Cola's German business alive, it was contributing, directly or indirectly, to the Nazi war effort. But what did Coca-Cola's headquarters in Atlanta know? And when did they know it? That part remains murky. There's no clear record showing the US branch directly approved of Max Keith's actions. But there's also no record of condemnation. Coca-Cola never publicly distanced itself from its German operation, even as the war unfolded. And when the dust settled after 1945, Max Keith was celebrated. Let that sink in. A man who kept Coca-Cola flowing under the Third Reich was rewarded for brand loyalty. In the post-war years, Coca-Cola rapidly reabsorbed the German subsidiary. Fanta, born in fascism, was rebranded and launched globally. By the 1950s and 60s, it became one of Coca-Cola's most profitable lines, with no reference to its Nazi origins. It's a story that repeats across history. Corporations that straddle the line between neutrality and opportunism, surviving regimes of all kinds just to keep the machines running and the profits flowing. Coca-Cola wasn't alone. Other American companies, IBM, Ford, General Motors, also had controversial ties to Nazi Germany. But Coca-Cola's case is unique because it never produced weapons, machinery, or uniforms. It sold a lifestyle, a brand, an idea. And somehow, that made it even more powerful. Even while Germany was committing genocide, Coca-Cola's marketing machine kept humming. Advertisements in Nazi Germany painted the drink as refreshing, wholesome, and proudly German. The American roots were downplayed. Coca-Cola became a symbol of German ingenuity, despite being an American invention. And when materials ran low, the creation of Fanta allowed the company to continue operating, not just surviving, but thriving. At its peak during the war, Coca-Cola GmbH had 43 bottling plants across the Reich and occupied Europe. It was one of the most resilient commercial networks in wartime Germany. What's often forgotten is that Germany was not just a battlefield, it was also a marketplace. The Nazi regime didn't reject capitalism, it manipulated it. And American companies that played along were often rewarded with favorable treatment, access to resources, and legal protection. Max Keith made sure Coca-Cola got all of that. He aligned the company's operations with the Nazi government's regulations. He joined the appropriate trade organizations. He avoided hiring Jews. He followed Nazi labor directives. In every way that mattered, Coca-Cola, in Germany, adapted to fit the regime, and the regime let it grow. The question isn't whether Coca-Cola supported Nazism. The question is, how far should a company go to protect its brand, even in the face of evil. There's no evidence Coca-Cola's German plants used forced labor from concentration camps. That separates it from more egregious wartime collaborators. But in a totalitarian state, complicity isn't always about brutality. Sometimes it's about silence, about staying just neutral enough to keep your place at the table. And Coca-Cola did just that. When the war ended, the German economy was in ruins. Cities were leveled. Millions were dead. But Coca-Cola's infrastructure, its bottling plants, distribution networks, and brand loyalty remained intact. It had survived the Nazi regime without losing its grip on the German market. In fact, post-war reports show Coca-Cola was in a prime position to expand, and with Fanta in its back pocket, it had a new product line ready for global distribution. By the 1950s, Fanta was officially launched worldwide. The original formula was changed, the origin story buried, and the drink became a staple in Coca-Cola's international portfolio. In Latin America, Europe, and Asia, Fanta was marketed as fun, fruity, and family-friendly. But it all started. Today, most people sipping a Fanta have no idea about its origins. There's no mention of Nazi Germany on the label. No reference to the scarcity-driven improvisation under fascism. No footnote about Max Keith or the silent cooperation that kept Coca-Cola GmbH alive while the world burned. But that erasure, that historical amnesia, is by design. After World War II, American companies were eager to reframe their narratives. Coca-Cola, for its part, leaned hard into Cold War marketing. The drink became a symbol of democracy, capitalism, and American cultural dominance. Soldiers in Korea and Vietnam drank it. Advertisements placed Coke at the heart of every American family, every front porch, every baseball game. Meanwhile, Fanta was given a new identity, scrubbed clean of its past. Bright colors, tropical flavors, and playful branding replaced its dark wartime roots. To most consumers, it became just another soda, but behind the cheerful fizz was a calculated rewrite of history. This isn't just about Coca-Cola. It's about how power works, about how corporations survive, not by taking sides, but by adapting, by serving whatever flag flies over the factory, as long as the product keeps moving. Max Keith didn't create Fanta because he admired the Nazi regime. He created it because he had a factory full of workers, a supply chain on life support, and a brand he refused to let die. That's the logic of business in wartime. Adapt or disappear. And Coca-Cola, through him, chose to adapt. The irony is striking. In the land of Nazi propaganda, one of the most popular drinks came from an American company. And it stayed popular, not in secret, but with the full awareness of the regime. Because the Nazis, for all their rhetoric, knew the power of branding. They knew that control didn't just come from tanks and guns, but from influence, from the things people consumed, the things they trusted. And Coca-Cola somehow earned that trust, even under the swastika. After the war, no one was held accountable. There were no trials for corporate cooperation, no sanctions, no reparations. Coca-Cola was welcomed back into Germany as a symbol of post-war renewal. New bottling plants were built, sales soared, and the past, it was quietly forgotten. Today, you won't find Coca-Cola celebrating this part of its history. There's no official apology, no museum exhibit, no admission of moral conflict. The story of Fanta's origins is sometimes acknowledged, usually in articles or documentaries, but always with a sense of distance, as if it happened to someone else. But history isn't just about what we remember. It's also about what we choose to forget. The story of Coca-Cola in Nazi Germany reminds us that brands are not neutral. They are shaped by the choices of the people who run them, by what they tolerate, by what they excuse, and by what they silence. It's easy to look back now and say, that was a different time. But the questions remain. What should a company do when profit collides with evil? Is neutrality ever truly neutral? And if survival requires cooperation with a dictatorship, is it worth the cost? Coca-Cola's legacy isn't defined by what it said during the war. It's defined by what it didn't say, by the silence, by the business-as-usual attitude that allowed it to weather one of the darkest chapters in human history without interruption. In the end, Coca-Cola didn't just survive Nazi Germany, it quenched its thirst. And for that, the world deserves to know.